and investment, as well as legislation to ensure that it would have the necessary legal foundations. And we're also considering funding models as part of the spending review.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome everything that the Deputy Prime Minister has said, and other honourable members too. But there is still a fatal flaw which has not been raised, and as someone with 30 years' experience in the real estate sector, can I urge the Deputy Prime Minister and her officials to focus on the single staircase? Because the 2009 Lakanal House report recommended that above 6 stories, retrospectively, fire suppression systems, sprinkler systems were installed. It's the best way to save lives. And I think we need to relook at that for existing buildings, and also future buildings can still be designed with a single staircase above 6 stories until 2028. That, Deputy Prime Minister, I would urge you to say is too long.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his contribution to this debate and also his expertise in this area. The approved document B is now subject to continuous review by the building safety regulator, who has already taken steps in regards to this matter, and a wider review of building safety regulations will be undertaken, and will consider what action is needed from all resulting recommendations.
Mike Reader.
Speaker, and thank you to the Secretary of State and her team for their work on the government's response to the inquiry. I would just say to the House, as someone who's spent my life in the construction sector, fixing construction products is incredibly challenging, so I really welcome the Green Paper published today, because we have to get that right. 2 questions to the Secretary of State. Could you confirm that the new regulator and advisor will work with existing government and industry bodies, including the Construction Leadership Council, which is co-chaired by the Minister of Industry and Mark Mace, who've done some brilliant work on building safety already? And could you also set out a bit more clearly the teeth that the new regulator is going to have to tackle dodgy developers and cowboy builders, big and small?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and yes, they will work together, and hopefully that's what we want to see. And the building safety regulator, we've granted funding and also support for them and the safety executive to improve the support that's offered, and will continue to do so. They will have teeth. We will be looking at what further legislation we may need, Madam Deputy Speaker, but we expect where there is issues and where things have been highlighted that action is taken, and where action isn't taken, we expect there to be consequences.
Paula Denyer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for her commitment to the inquiry's recommendations and her commitment to systemic change. Picking up the thread from the 2 honourable members opposite around an oversight mechanism for state-related deaths, I was shocked when I discovered that it is nobody's job to track and make sure that recommendations from Prevention of Future Death reports are enacted. These have a relevance for victims of huge tragedies like this one, but just as much for individual tragedies such as that of one of my constituents. And so I have a private member's bell in on this proposal. So I would like to ask the Deputy Prime Minister to meet with me to talk about this idea in detail and how it can be enacted.
Well, again, I think the honourable member is absolutely right to raise this regarding oversight mechanism, and I think I've addressed some of that and the wider issues that, not just in terms of this inquiry, but all inquiries that we've had, and there's been far too many inquiries into tragedies in that we shouldn't be having these scandals and these tragedies happen in the first place. But we are committed to looking at what oversight mechanisms. I've detailed the oversight mechanisms that I expect from my department and the recommendations from Grenfell, and I'm happy for her to bring that information, share that with my department, and I'll take considerations into account.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My thoughts today are with the survivors of the Grenfell Tower disaster and the 72 families who are mourning the loss of a loved one still, and I pay tribute to their immense dignity as they continue to fight for justice. I welcome the Deputy Prime Minister's clear commitment to implement all of Sir Martin Morbick's recommendations. I have constituents in Dulwich and West Norwood living in blocks with fire safety issues, often not cladding related, but issues that have been identified as part of the wider scandal in the construction industry that was uncovered by fire safety inspections post-Grenfell. That in some cases there have been fires in these blocks, terrifying fires, leaving residents feeling unsafe, and leaving leaseholders trapped in unsellable flats as building owners and construction firms argue over who is responsible for the fire safety defects and fail to move forward to resolve the issues. So can the Deputy Prime Minister say, as she moves forward to implement Sir Martin's recommendations, when she would expect my constituents to have a clear plan with a timescale attached to it for the remediation work that is needed in unsafe buildings? And where is the accountability in the meantime?
Again, I thank my honourable friend for her comments, and I absolutely agree that, you know, nearly 8 years on from the tragedy of Grenfell, people are still living in unsafe buildings, and that's completely unacceptable. I did respect and pay tribute to the previous governments, what they've done, and those legislation has enabled authorities to take action, and we've been supporting them in making sure that action is taken from those bodies. And our remediation acceleration plan will also outline how we can ensure that those responsible for remediating buildings, whether that's fire safety or any other defects, are held accountable, and that we can take those actions and get that remediation done as quickly as possible. I do not want it to take another 8 years before people are living in safe and secure homes. I expect to do it as quickly as possible, and action is already being taken.
Dr. Al Pinkerton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. And can I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for what she said today and how she said it. I hope that the families of the survivors of Grenfell Tower have heard what you have to say and find some reassurance in the acceptance of all of the recommendations. I have residents in my constituency of Surrey Heath who are today trapped in just the latest chapter of the fire safety scandal. Residents who have EWS1 forms similarly signed off by the notorious now fire safety engineer Adam Kiziak, who find themselves unable to sell their properties, unable to remortgage, but even more fundamentally, who don't know whether they are living in a dangerous building or not. And in neighbouring buildings built at exactly the same time, but signed off or have had their EWS1 forms produced by a different fire safety engineer, they have already been stripped of their cladding. I'm incredibly grateful to hear that you have accepted recommendations 15 and 16 and that you are looking at a professionalisation of the fire safety industry, greater regulation and a commitment to greater recruitment, because we know that those are some of the issues that have underpinned the EWS1 scandal. But can I urge you and your team, please, to think about emergency measures. And it can't just be right that we overlook the EWS1 forms that people already have because people don't know whether they are living in safe buildings or not. It cannot be right that we just overlook those forms. We have to fundamentally, rapidly reassess the safety of those buildings in order to allow them to be sellable or remediated again. Thank you.
Well, again, I refer back to what I said to my honourable friend, and I absolutely accept that people should be in safe and secure homes. The government remediation funds have a robust audit process in place to assess the quality of the fire risk assessments of external wards, and the audit process ensures that assessments that are carried out for buildings that are in our remediation funding programmes meet the appropriate standards, and where these standards are not met, we will take action to ensure that this is addressed.
Mary Kelly-Foy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The report on the Grenfell Tower inquiry is utterly scathing about the role of central government and its obsession with deregulation. The drive to scrap the so-called red tape was a key failing which led to such a terrible incident and avoidable loss of life. So can the Deputy Prime Minister confirm to the House that this approach has been ditched in relation to policies which are concerning fire safety, building safety and the construction sector?
Again, my honourable friend's absolutely right to highlight that just about every system failed, Madam Deputy Speaker, which I outlined in my opening statement. Everybody needs to understand what led to what happened on that night in Grenfell, and that there has been action taken. There isn't the same regulatory system that was in place back in 2017. There has been a number of acts of Parliament that has meant that there is more instruction and more legal requirements for building safety. We will continue to update that. We have legislation going through at the moment in Parliament which hopefully will deal with social landlords and will give renters more protection as well. We know there's much more for us to do, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I hope across the House we'll continue to work to put